Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We are going to cover today how to create arpeggios within Vital, specifically Trance Arpeggios today, and I'm just going to show you a really easy way to do that using LFOs. And as you might already know, Vital comes with a handful of LFOs, giving us plenty of space to create a sequence. However, this technique applies to all synths that do not come with arpeggiators, and you can use LFOs and MSEGs. Okay, let's get started with the video. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell icon. And if you have anything to add to the video or any questions about what you see in the video, let me know down in the comments. And here we are in Vital, and you can see that the meerkats have returned. They're creating some arpy goodness, and I'm going to show you how to create an arpeggiated sequence that you're going to hear right now. You can see here at the bottom, just holding one key. You can hear that there is a lot going on in there, but it's not as difficult as you expect. I think it's just more tedious with the programming of all of this that you can see in the LFO section. And I'm going to explain what each one does. So for now, we will keep this one over here, and I'm going to duplicate this Vital track, open back up. And now we can see that we have our duplicate. We can initialize this. And what we're going to do is take some things from here. So I'll bring this back over and then we can copy and paste bits across and stuff. So you don't have to watch me tediously program this, but I'll explain how I did this. And starting with the arpeggio, this is really just as simple as programming something on the normal way that you do this through MIDI, or exporting an arpeggio that's not too complex, so you're not making too much work for yourself. And then you can obviously recreate it here in Vital. As you know, I've already prepped a sequence, so if we take a look here into user, and we can see Trance Arp grid, and this is already programmed in the steps to make a full ARP sequence based on the maximum grid size that Vital offers, which is 32. So you can see here, if we drag up the X, we've got 32, and that's what this is programmed to. I'm going to drag this up to 12, just for continuity, and this will be explained in the second LFO. So this one is really just the volume control. This is a starting point for our volume control, shall I say. So I'm going to drag this across, turn the volume down on oscillator 1, and I'm just going to drag it to, say, the sort of 3 o'clock position. So now when we hold a key, we get a little bit of an erratic arpeggiated sequence going. So I'm going to bring this down to 2/1, so that's 2 bars. So this one's not meant to be here, so the easiest way is to set this paintbrush to step. Drag that down. These signify the start of each bar. So that is bar 1, that's bar 2. And I'm going to turn the smoothing off. So they're just on and off values, down being off, up being on. Now the magic is to change the notation pitch, so it sounds like you're playing it on an arpeggiator or you're playing it by hand. And that's where LFO 2 comes in. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to User, Trance Arp Grid, and this is going to become our pitch. I'm going to drag this across. Let's just do that again. Let's drag this across to our pitch. And you can see it's assigned its LFO2 to the pitch, and when we enter value you can see it's assigned 48. That's 48 semitones, and we only want to control 12 in this demo. So I'm going to hit 12, so that's only going to pick 12 notes. And what I'm going to do is set this to 32 again, so we're on a 32 grid. And the reason I set that other one to 12 for continuity is just to show you that 12 means 12 semitones. So now we have 12 steps, and we know exactly where the notes are by counting them. And we can set this to 2/1 as well, so 2 bars. So we can hear it's controlling the pitch, and we're just going to remove this one. I need to set this to paintbrush and step. Drag that down. Now there's no sequence there, but we can hear that it's changing pitch when this changes position. And I'm just going to show you the basic premise. So if we look back at our original preset, you can see that we've programmed the pitch on LFO1 in this case, but we've done volume first on ours. And you can see this is the meerkat madness that is happening. So if we look here, this is 5 steps up, that's 12 steps, that's 5 steps, that is 10 steps. So we can work out roughly how to make this pretty quickly. So going back to our pitch control, I'm going to set this to 5 steps. So we're down at 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is our first starting point. And if we listen to that now, pressing a key. Perfect. Going back, we can see 12 and then it repeats again. So we've got the full 12 and then it repeats again to that. And then we can see it goes 10 and then repeats the same note at the bottom again. And then it goes to 8. 10, the same, and 8. Now you can see the meerkat madness is starting to take shape, and then you can see it repeats. So this one repeats, this one repeats, this one repeats with the repetition of the 10 again, and then it starts again. So that's as simple as that is. It's just a repetition of the same thing for this particular ARP. And we can see 10, and then we can just repeat this again here. So you could just program this once, just change the grid size and actually just it'll look a little bit larger, but once you start that playing, you just change your frequency and it'll just play that same loop. I'm just choosing to do it this way so we can make amendments if we need to. So like that, like that. I'm just looking to the left to match the heights. Here and there. So there is our sequence. Now we hold this key. It's playing a standard sort of upwards drifting arpeggiated sequence. And now that we have that set up, we can focus on looking at the bass. I'm not focusing on the sound design, I'm just using saw waves to default. I'm not thinking about the sound design at this moment in time. And the best way to do this is to turn oscillator 1 off, oscillator 2 on, and then repeat the same process. So we want the volume first. And I'm going to paste the volume first into LFO3. I'm going to make that 32 steps and I'm going to put my paintbrush on ready. And I'm going to attach this to the volume. So turn this off and set it to about 3 o'clock so it matches the same as oscillator 1. And these are going to be the lower portion notes of the sequence. So that is just the top melody on oscillator 1. This is going to be the bottom part. And before we go any further with this now, we can recap on the first 2. So the first one is the volume. The second one is our pitch. Now you can see these notes here that are down at the bottom are actually classed as a note. So you'd hear those. So you can see when we go back to the volume, so look at step number 2. Step number 2 is actually off on the volume. So that's stopping that note coming through. So if I just hit the key of C, every time it gets to the bottom, it's just going to be a C note and it's going to sound a little bit weird. So we can bypass our volume and just have a listen to how this works. And this will explain why I'm going to do what I'm going to do next in oscillator 2. So you can see I'm hitting the key of C down here. And if we go here and just bypass the level and just turn this up for a second. And that's fine if you want to keep that same C note in the bass permanently, but we want to change it, then by all means do that. And that way you can just go straight on to your next step of the sound design and using the filters, etc. This applies differently for our bass. So the bass is actually going to be 16ths all the way across. We're not going to have any gaps. So the levels on these ones that are going to oscillator 2, I'm just going to set these 2 on. I'm just going to put these steps back on. So they're just going to be full volume for now, just so we can hear all of those notes, and I'm going to turn smoothing off. So now we can just hear a colossal note playing at the moment. Just turn that down a smidge. But if we turn one down, we can hear that it's turning off. So I'm just going to put these 2 to 1. So they match the rest of the speed. And what we can do is then say, grab this, copy. Sometimes it does this when you right click. Go to LFO4, right click and paste. I'm going to set this to step and paintbrush as well. I'm going to put 32 and I'm going to put this to 12 because this is our pitch grid. I'm going to set that to the pitch And I'm going to say enter value. Instead of 48, we're going to do 12 again. So I'm just keeping him within 1 octave range. Now that is all set up. We've got volume and pitch for this one as well. If we was to put this one to the bottom, we're going to get 1 octave below. And let's set this to 2/1, same speed. So you can hear that's not too great. I'm going to drop this here so we're actually operating a bit lower. In fact, let's go to 2 octaves below. You can hear it's going to change pitch. So taking a look at our other one here, if we look at the pitch, which is LFO number 3, we can see the pattern is the polar opposite of the main pattern on pitch. And we can see that the second and the fourth, just looking at these two, are totally off. So let's have a look at LFO number 3, and you can see the second and the fourth are on. So that means that this is going to be, say, C1, and this is going to be C2. And that's filling in the gaps. That's the gaps of the melody. So these are the gaps in which the melody doesn't occupy. And all we're doing, you can see these 3 will be stood on their own, and there they are. So you can see it's just going to be a 1 gap, and then 2, 2, 2, 3, and then 1, because that's where it starts again. So we want this to look like this. So this is opposite to what the melody is doing. Just check this against our bass. So we've got this one, and then a gap of 2. And it's going to counteract what the melody is doing. So those bass notes are filling in the gaps where the melody is not playing. And it's a gap of 3, and then it starts again. So remember, it looks like there's a gap of 4, but it's not. That's the start of the second bar. And then a gap of 2. Fill that one back in. A gap of 2. Gap of 2. Okay, so I've just referred to the other one. I've just done that slightly wrong. Just sent me on the wrong path there. So there's only 2 at that start. I'm not copying this. I was trying to remember. So we should have it like that, like that, like that, and then a gap of 3, and then that's your 4th gap there. Perfect. So that sounds a little bit odd on its own. And if we put this back with our arpeggiated sequence, the volumes are all the same at the moment, so let's just make a little bit of variation like this. And I'm just going to repeat sort of roughly the same pattern like this for now. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect. You can see I'm just randomly drawing this in. I'm not trying to be accurate in this particular instance. Oh, let's hit the same key. Perfect. So that's now sounding a little bit more natural, apart from the fact that this is also sounding pretty loud. So let's just change our levels. Make sure this is our level. Just hover over there and it'll say oscillator level 1. Oops, turn that one down. Okay, so just add a little bit of natural progression and movement in there. It's not necessarily what we'd want, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that we can use velocity in this as well. Okay, so I'm just hitting save, and now we can focus on the changing part. So now how do we make that bass change? As you can see, there's only 2 bars. We could set this to 4, but then we'd be drawing really finely and that would look ridiculous. Plus it only goes up to 32 steps, so you won't be able to get any finer than what we're at. But what we can do is still alter the pitch over here. So I'm going to grab LFO 5, double click here, leave it set to 8, put this on steps, just drag across so I can see my steps. And then if we look back at the original, you can see LFO 6 is our bass control, and that is over 8 bars. So let's go back to ours and change this to 8 bars, like so. I'm going to turn smoothing off. And we're going to drag and drop this onto the pitch again for our second oscillator. Now you can see hovering over it, it says 72, and I'm going to set this to exactly the same, which is 12. And to get the same bass, I am just going to right click and copy from this one and paste. So now we've got the same bass over here. Let's just check. That is looking the same. And now if we hold our key, this is going to change at each step. And there we are. You can set this to 12, obviously, if you're programming this in from scratch, and then just follow the increments there. Again, you've already created it in the MIDI, so it'll just be a case of counting. If you start on C, if you look at the bottom of the keyboard here, and say your next note in your ARP is, say, this E flat, you're just going to count 1, 2, 3, so you know it's 3 steps up, and that will take you to that next note. Okay, so hitting save on that to make sure we're all good. I'm going to leave the filter adjustments to set to filter 1 and 2 because that's exactly how I want it. And we can turn these on now and start getting a little bit more creative. Let's set these up. I'm going to bring the resonance down just a little bit on each one. I'm going to leave them set on 12, and I think I'm going to bring them down to about here. Now you can hear that the filters stay closed regardless of what's going on here. We can't use the envelopes to change this because these are one-time hits. These are repeating, so we need the envelope to stay sustained, so these notes are permanently held for these to open. These are essentially just gates of opening the sound as it's going along. So we need to create something that is a little bit different to control the filters. So again, we can load my trance grid starting point that we loaded at the beginning, or we can just set a grid up to 32 and create lots of little points. And these act as short envelopes. So normally, if you look at envelope 2, I'd use this to open and close my filters, or one of the filters, and that would be a plug. And essentially that is all I've done here, but over 32 and set the same frequency, so it's opening and closing at the same rate the melody is playing. So let's do the same over here. And this is really easy to set up because we don't actually have to do anything here. We can just go again, user, once you've got it saved, Trance Arp Grid. But I'm going to change this to, from steps, which we usually have, is to down. And you can see that's been set to a downwards triangle. So I'm going to set this now to 32 on the grid, drag across, and you can see now we've got 32 individual little envelopes. I'm going to set this to 2/1 and turn the smoothing off, and I'm going to attach this to filter 1. Let's bring this down so it's a little bit more bearable. And now we have control. Now if you think that's a little bit too sharp, you can just drag the curve icons here. If we can just grab one. Oh, we need to turn the paintbrush off. So you can actually lengthen the notes if you want to, but for now we're just going to leave it at that. Let's bring this up, bring that up. And then we're going to use the same one for time's sake on the second filter for our bass. And for now I'm going to use the mod wheel on both, so I'm just going to drag them both to the filters, and then when we open the mod wheel, that opens up our filters so we can hear it at both angles. And before we move any further, just so we have the sequence in the same key wherever we play it, because at the moment this is unusable, this is just pointless. That's too low. And I'm hitting middle C at the moment. You can see on the keyboard middle C. And I'm going to go to the Advanced tab and hit Note Track on and turn them both off. Now you can hear our sequence sounds different. And that's because it's reading this point. So when I'm hitting middle C, it's actually probably C2 in my opinion if we just hit Note Track. If I play an octave below, that's what it's doing. If we turn this off and hit middle C, that is exactly what it's doing. So how can we change that? We can just pull this one up to 12 and pull this up to -12 instead of -24, so it's only 1 octave. And we're back to where we are, and it doesn't matter. Let's just put that on -12. For some reason it's moving. Now, no matter where we hit on the keyboard, you can see on the keyboard at the bottom, I'm hitting all the full variety of keys on the 88 keys, and nothing is actually changing. So if you have a preset and it's intended to be in the key of C, that is what you would do. If you wanted it in a different key, you'd change the positions on here. So 12 or 0 is essentially going to be C. So if you wanted it to start on C sharp, you'd actually put them up one semitone each, and that would start on a different key. So let's get down to a little bit of sound design. So you can see on here that we've used a little bit of unison on here. There's probably some effects. Yeah, a couple of effects on there. So let's recreate some of this. And you can see I left this one at 24 on that particular case, so we might change that at some point. So I'm going to bring this up to 7 voices. I'm going to bring this out. Let's have a listen to what we did on the sound design here. 12 voices at 16%. And then this one on the bass, we used 2 voices, and then I narrowed this down. Okay, so it sounded a little bit loose, so let's put this back down to -24. That's much nicer. Open the mod wheel. Now let's get on to some nitty-gritty stuff, just tweaks here and there. And you can do these forever till you get the sound just perfect. And what I'm going to do is use macros 1 and 2 to control the filter depth. And what I mean by that is how much these LFOs are controlling the filters, how much they influence the filter. So you can see here we have LFO 6 controlling both. So what I'm going to do is go to LFO 6 and drag on top of here, so you can see now it'll put a little dot in the middle, and it's actually being controlled on that modulation. So that modulation can't happen now till I turn this macro control up, which controls how much that depth is happening. And if we look at LFO 6, you can see it's about 3 o'clock position and a 4 o'clock position on that one. So you can see here and here. So they're both around about 4 o'clock, to be honest. That is what the mod wheel is going to control. It's going to control that, just that little portion there, how much it influences. So full will be just where we had it before we put macros on. We can have it more subtle if we want, or fully open. And I'm going to call that Arp filter and bass filter. I'm also going to control the smoothing, so it's going to simulate like I'm changing the attack. Filter control here is where the smoothing was applied. And that is applying a little bit of smoothing, which simulates the attack time being amended. And I'll just call that Arp Smooth for now, or Arp Smoot. This seems to be a recurring theme in the videos, the smoot word, so I'm just going to call that, let's just call it smooth, because obviously it's an arpeggio in its right. There is no other elements in this particular one. Okay, so let's put some effects on this and give it the final touches. So the first thing I'm going to add is an EQ, and I'm going to drop the lows out of it. Balance these out a little bit more. Just gets that unnecessarily like low rumble out of the way, and we'll put that to the top of the chain. I'm going to put some delay on, which is here. I'm going to set this to stereo and put one of them to dotted. Just some really quick stuff to save you the hassle of watching me program in slow motion. That will do. Bit of reverb. Just going to drop the lows out and go for around the 100 Hertz mark. Get a bit of a bigger size. That really is the maximum that we want this mod wheel to open, so we can change this by bringing these down. Its maximum range is less. And something that I like to do a lot of is we'll just use macro 4 to turn off the two effects, the what I will call wet effects. So it just gives you the option if you want to process them outside in your processing chain, you can just turn it off here. And we'll call that wet effects. And there we are. We have built an arpeggiated sequence within Vital just using the LFOs, because obviously, as we know, there is no arpeggiator in Vital at this time, but we can use workarounds to get things going. So you can see the meerkats have achieved their job. They've created a trance arp. If you did enjoy the video, please let me know down in the comments if there's anything you want to add about the programming. Please let me know as well. I would be happy to see anything that we could change in our procedure. And finally, don't forget to hit subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.